First of all, we must answer the question of what exactly autism spectrum disorder is. According to the Autism Society, autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, is a complex developmental disability. It affects a person's ability to communicate and interact with others. ASD is defined by a certain set of behaviors and is a spectrum condition that affects individuals differently and to varying degrees. Some of the behaviors associated with autism include delayed learning of language, difficulty making eye contact or holding a conversation, difficulty with executive functioning, which relates to reasoning and planning, narrow, intense interests, poor motor skills, and sensory sensitivities. To be perfectly frank, most representations of autism in our media are inaccurate, and this does autistic people in real life a disservice. Inaccurate portrayals of any condition are concerning, as they can lead to an audience internalizing stereotypes towards people who have it. As someone who is on the autism spectrum, I believe it's very important to have good representation, as I very rarely feel represented by what I see in the media, and many fellow autistic people that I have spoken to feel the same way. Most commonly, autistic characters are featured in dramatic films such as Rain Man, Temple Grandin, Mozart and the Whale, The Boy Who Could Fly, I Am Sam, and What's Eating Gilbert Grape. In most of these examples, the fact that a character is autistic is a central feature of the story, or at least their character. It's not very often that a character just happens to be autistic and is partaking in the story regardless of disability, without the story revolving around it. Their disability is used to create conflict in the story. For example, if an autistic character has a meltdown, or simply acts in a way that is not normal, it causes conflict with the other characters in the story. These things can also be used to garner sympathy from the audience, as they can be glad they are not in that situation, either being a disabled person or taking care of one. When we look at individual autistic characters, more problems become evident. Even though autism is a complex disorder, autistic characters in film rarely show a lot of variety between them. Many are depicted as cold or unempathetic, even though autistic people can be just as emotional as anyone else, if not more. Autistic people can also be shown as childish, incompetent, or unreasonably stubborn. Sometimes autistic behaviors such as rocking back and forth or flapping their hands in order to self-soothe are shown to the audience to mark the character as weird and abnormal. There also tends to be a focus in these films on each autistic character having some sort of savant ability, or a special skill that they have in order to make up for not being able to do the same things that normal people do. Many autistic people do not report this as accurate to their own experience, and think the idea that they need to be able to do something special to be elevated above their disability is hurtful. When analyzing the depictions of autistic characters that we see in films, it's also important to take note of the actors that are cast to play autistic characters. Most of the autistic characters in these films are played by white actors, usually male. This is disingenuous to reality because autism is not a disorder that exclusively affects white males. Anyone can be on the spectrum, but it is more difficult for a non-autistic person to believe a woman or a person of color saying that they are autistic if they have never seen such a thing before, in media or otherwise. As mentioned before, creating these sorts of stereotypes can harm real autistic people, because an audience having only a minimal, inaccurate knowledge of autism only contributes to the isolation and lack of understanding that many autistic people already feel in society. There is also a habit among non-autistic people to minimize or discredit an autistic person's experience of their own life, because they are not seen as being competent due to their disability, which these harmful stereotypes do not help ease. Realistically, filmmakers are not always able to create a nuanced depiction of disability within the constraints of a film. From a Hollywood standpoint, the film needs to convey that a character is autistic without spending a lot of screen time explaining things, so they tend to fall back on the same general set of autistic traits and stereotypes again and again, because that's what the audience recognizes. However, if a film is going to center around a person's autism, then it follows that the filmmakers should take the time to make sure their representation is accurate. Showing the same stereotypes in order to make autism identifiable to a non-autistic audience only creates a vicious cycle, as that is the frame of reference they will have about autistic people, and then you have a large group of people believing the same inaccurate things about a disability they have no experience with. Perhaps by trying to represent every autistic person, Hollywood is not truly representing any autistic person. There have been some much better examples of autistic representation in the past 2 decades. For instance, the 2006 film Snowcake features Sigourney Weaver as a middle-aged woman with autism, and while Sigourney Weaver is not autistic, she researched her role and was coached by autism author and speaker Ross Blackburn. However, it is clear that we still have a long way to go. It will take a long time to undo the damage done by the stereotypes that we have seen in films for so many years, but I believe that discussing these issues is the first step to doing so.